But as a board member of Parting Ways, you and I will talk about that individually after this. But what occurred is that the mediator played judge, jury, not even introduced herself. The rules for the mediation came to both the town of Plymouth and Parting Ways, who both had to be there at 10 o'clock. If you were not there at 10 o'clock, according to the occurred, is that the mediator played judge, jury, not even introduced herself. The rules for the mediation came to both the town of Plymouth and Parting Ways, who both had to be there at 10 o'clock. If you were not there at 10 o'clock, according to the Commission's instructions, it would be over. Both the town of Plymouth and...
You know, we're all home where we're born. This is an important message that I want everybody to be aware of. And I certainly can use some support spiritually, mentally, financially, whatever. Because I just found out the big battle is going to take place at the Newport Tower on December 21st, 2012. Okay, now we have 1 year to stop these maniacs from using the grid, Mother Nature's grid, another rape of the planet, taking the energy and using it for themselves to control things. But I've been slipping around here and there, interrupting their rituals and redirecting their disasters and doing the spiritual thing with the ancestors. And so far, so good. They haven't been able to pull off what they want to pull off. This next video, I would like you to, you know, if you know me, by now you can always go check me out. You know, that's what the net's for. And we're soon going to lose that. So this is the last chance to go viral. December 21st, which is less than a month away. Meet me at Newport Tower at 9 o'clock in the morning. There's going to be a Venus and Mars alignment, and the ancient temple, Knights Templar, built this, the Sinclair family built this tower right next to a time capsule and a pillar. Well, anyway, you can always check out the Newport Tower video that I made. They're all on the list. But you see, only 2 of us were there the last time to counteract dozens of them. And they didn't know what to do then, but this year they probably have a plan. These people know who I am, and they know I can, you know, jump on my Merkiba and check out what they're doing, and come back here and produce these DVDs and video clips for YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, posting anywhere I can. And I know they do everything they can to stop you from looking at these videos. Yes, I'm a Cape Verdean elder, but people don't know what that is. I can only compare it to what we used to call shamans or priests. In fact, when I was a young man, aka King Priest Musa, I understood the energies, feminine and masculine energies and things like that. I assumed everybody did, but all this stuff is in the videos. So if you're interested in me, you go look at it. If you're interested in the Parting Wats Project, which is a lifeline, it's the most important discovery in America in the past 300 years. In fact, the quest for the Holy Grail cannot even really be phantomed unless we go back to the source of this revolution that took place under George Washington's leadership, and how the founding fathers created these Freemasonic and secret societies. And we're including the Africans, called Prince Hall Masons. They played their role, and the Cape Verdean people are the hybrids that they created for this project. But now that they don't need their slaves anymore, all these things are coming into play, and it's important that we don't lose our population learning a lesson that they lie and they mislead us and they control what we know. So it's important that you do something. In the initiation of doing something, you are reversing and putting a torque on their plan. You're collectively joining one force that's worth 10,000 of their forces. You got to understand that everybody knows a little bit of every part of this picture, but nobody knows the entire picture, not even a little bit. So what we got to do is do our part, all right? And just doing our part, we'll be able to meet this goal at the Parting Wats Project in 1 year, and maybe survive if they got or even detour what they're trying to do. Because I know there's more talented shamans and people out there than I am. All right, God bless you, and please, leave a comment if you don't like it, something, respond, because that program is of not responding and not making contact is the root of your fear. And overcome fear, you're opening the portal, a portal that you'll be able to understand and control your environment. You know what I'm saying? Your family, within your environment, will be controlled too, under your leadership, because you'll be awake and aware. Okay, this is Wayne Barbosa, elder of the Barbosa tribe.
Access to resources
God bless you.
that cost money or
Hello, my name is Doreen Ellen Belt of Time. And this is going to be a continuation, a necessary continuation, of a video I made in which I discussed the fact that Yeshua ben Pantera did not intend what he taught for the Gentiles. And there are a number of quotes which show that that's the case. Christians who believe that it was he who intended, that he learned that, delude themselves. He himself said a number of times that his teachings were not for Gentiles. However, his teachings reached the Gentiles, and today we're going to be talking about the beginning of Christianity from the time of Paul. Who Paul actually was, what his mission actually was, why he did go out to the Gentiles, and why you were entrusted with which was actually a sacred mission. In order to understand what happened at that time, we have to understand that we're talking about the period directly before, during, and after the destruction of the Second Temple. About the temple service, Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the Righteous, who was one of the last survivors of the Sanhedrin, used to say, on three things the world is sustained: on Torah, on the temple service, and on deeds of loving kindness. You'll find this at the very beginning of what we call Pirkei Avot, which is translated incorrectly, but it's difficult to translate, as Ethics of the Fathers. The Jews saw that the temple was going to be destroyed, and they knew that one of the pillars that holds up the world was going to come down. They also knew that the leg of deeds of loving kindness had also been weakened, because if we had been strong enough in deeds of loving kindness, the temple wouldn't be being destroyed. So all that was left was the Torah. And the rabbis had to find a way of ensuring that the Jews would not forget the Torah when they went out into the diaspora. They understood that Jews were going to be dispersed. They understood that the Romans intended to leave only a very small number of Jews who would be under their total control in what they called Yehuda, which is Israel. And many would be killed, and many would be dispersed to their various colonies all over the world. That being the case, what they were most afraid of is that Jews would forget the Torah, that we would forget our language, that we would forget our traditions, and because in order to understand the written Torah, we have to have the key of the oral Torah, which was the most vulnerable, they took a number of extreme methods to protect that. I want to explain to you what really happened in the temple so that you'll understand why it was so critical, not just for the Jews, but for the Gentiles. Jews and Gentiles alike would come to the temple knowing that they had sinned, and they came there for expiation. Now, on the lowest levels, they saw the physical sacrifices being carried out so that they would symbolically understand the relationship of the soul and the body. The priests themselves and the sages and the Jews who are on a very, very high level of learning did not need the physical expression of the sacrifices. The word in Hebrew for sacrifice is korban, which comes from the root. Karav means to draw near. They were able to draw near in prayer on much higher levels, and not only that, they were also able to understand what the Torah was saying on very, very deep levels, where on the surface levels it appears to be talking about sacrifices of animals. They also understood there were people who were so mired in physicality that they had to have that physical ceremony carried out in order for them to be able to understand it at all. The people who needed that the most were the Gentiles, even more than the Jews. And so the sacrifices were carried out in the outermost chatzer, how do you say it, courtyard of the temple for the Gentiles. But the real work of the priests was not that. The real work of the priests was people would come and tell them what they had done, what their troubles were, what their sins were. And the priest's job was to translate what they were saying in their languages back into Hebrew, and performing the alphanumerical secrets of the Torah to be able to get to the root of that person's soul and fix what they had done at the root, and from the root bring down a healthier expression of their being. That was the real work of the priests. And when you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was written by a community that was run by priests, if you can see Hebrew, you understand that they were on an exquisite level of being able to do that. Their knowledge of the Hebrew language and how to change one expression into an equivalent but higher expression was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to read you a job description. And it's going to sound so fantastic to you that you may not believe that it was really real. But I'm going to show you that there was another quote that says exactly the same thing in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In Sanhedrin, in Tractate Sanhedrin 17 Aleph, 17:1, says the following. Rabbi Yochanan said, "None are to be appointed members of the Sanhedrin, but men of stature, wisdom, good appearance, mature age, with a knowledge of sorcery, and who are conversant with all the 70 languages of mankind." Why do they need to know sorcery? Sorcery is absolutely forbidden to Jews to practice, but they had to know sorcery in order to be able to help the Gentiles who were practicing sorcery when they came to the temple to be able to find expiation for them. They had to learn all of the 70 languages. I can't explain it now, but when Torah comes down, it comes down first of all through Hebrew, and then it branches out. There are 70 languages and various dialects, but there are 70 root languages, and we learned that from the fact that 70 Jews went down into Mitzrayim, went down into Egypt. Those 70 souls represent the 70 roots of the languages and how they are to be fixed from Mitzrayim, which is the deepest level of diaspora, of Gentile diaspora. It is so amazing that they said that they had to know all of the languages, and they had to know all of the different kinds of magic the Gentiles performed, that you might think that who could know 70 languages. But then we read in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Hamevaker, who was the supervisor of all of the camp of the Dead Sea sect, who is in charge of all of the camps, shall be from 30 years old and up to 50 years old. He must be experienced in every secret known to men and in every language. Exactly the same thing. How can a person at the age of 30 have already mastered 70 languages? The closest that I know that came to it in modern times is Rabbi Ernest Klein, who was fluent in 40 extant and extinct languages. To actually know 70 languages, how could they do that? The only way that they could do that was by knowing the root of Hebrew so well that they understood everything that flowed out of that, because all languages are combinations and permutations of Hebrew. And they were able to recombine that back into the Hebrew, fix it, and then give a holier interpretation to the person of what they had experienced. And it would uplift that the person higher to the root of their soul, and they would be thereby purified. When the temple ceased to exist, that practice did not totally cease to exist, but it ceased to exist as a physical manifestation in the world that was central, that people could actually come and experience it. And the Jews were terribly, terribly concerned of what was going to happen, both to the Jews and to the Gentiles, as a result of the temple being destroyed. There's a very, very strange story of a rabbi by the name of Akiva in Torah. There are a number of strange stories about him. If If you accept what the Talmud says about him in simple terms, he had to live to be 120 years old. And we know that his life is divided into 3 different periods. He was a master of the letters himself. He was one of the 10 rabbis whom the Romans tortured to death absolutely horribly, after which time what was remaining of his flesh was sold in the market. Died a horrible death. He reached an extremely high level of holiness. And yet he makes a very, very strange mistake, as though he claimed that a man whose name was Baal Kochva was the Mashiach. Baal Kochva has another name. He's also called Baal Koziva. Both of those names are very strange. Baal Kochva in Aramaic means son of a star, which means his father's name was Star, Kochva. That's not a very normal Jewish name. Baal Koziva, which he was also called, is even more strange. Koziva is a lying, is deception, deceit. So how could somebody on the level of Akiva have thought that this man was the Messiah and made a mistake about it? There's only one person in Jewish history whose name is also Star, and the name appears also in a book in which there are many, many, many hidden secrets. Her name is Esther. The name actually comes. There's only one person in Jewish history whose name is also Star, and the name appears also in a book in which there are many, many, many hidden secrets. Her name is Esther. The name actually comes from the Hebrew root samech tav resh. Satar means to hide. Esther means I will hide. I will hide something. The reference of the name Baal Kochava in the Jewish mind immediately relates to Esther, and you ask yourself, what's being hidden? And then you say to yourself, why is he called Koziva? Why is he called a deceiver? And these questions aren't resolved in simple terms in Torah. In a minute I'll get to explain to you who Paul was and what he did and why, and this will all begin to make sense to you. In order for us to be able to understand who Paul was and what his mission was, we need to look at some of the words of a very, very great rabbi at that time, whose name was Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. He was one of Akiva's students. He wrote the following: Woe to the mortal being who says the Torah came to tell stories and earthly matters. Let me show you. A garment is that which is visible to everyone. Fools see a person dressed beautifully and look no further. They consider the dress as the body and the body as the soul. So too with the Torah. It has a body which is composed of the commandments of the Torah that are called the body of the Torah. This body is clothed with garments which are stories of this world. The fools of the world look only at that garment which is the story in the Torah and are not aware of any more. Those who know more do not look at the dress, but rather at the body beneath that dress. The wise, the sages, the servants of the highest king, those who stood at Mount Sinai look only at the soul, which is the actual essence of the entire Torah. In the time to come, they are destined to behold the soul of the Torah. So not only do we learn from this that the stories that are in the Torah are actually just the garment, and by the way, that is all that can be translated. All that can be translated from Hebrew into the other languages of the world is the garment. The inner soul of the Torah is not given to translation in other languages. What happens is when we learn Torah year after year after year, starting from the time we start to learn when we're babies, in fact, we're taught that mothers should, when they're pregnant, go to houses of learning and stand and listen to what's being said so that her unborn child can already begin to learn Torah. They actually learn Torah within the uterus as well, but to begin to learn it from the world. And we learn Torah all of our lives. The process of looking at the garment of the Torah, which has hints in it that there's something else, eventually makes us not only able to look into the depths of the Torah, but also to understand the same thing is happening with our perception. That the stories of our lives should be looked into much more deeply, and we should be able to understand the soul of what's happening in our lives. This can only be accomplished in Hebrew. I'm sorry you don't have to like that, but that's the reality. That was the gift that was given to the Jews. And in order to be able to understand the inner levels, Gentiles have to come to the Jews and give over their stories, and only we can translate them back into Hebrew and show you the root of your soul. So it was actually the Gentiles who suffered the most from the destruction of the temple. Where does Paul come in? Jews do not name themselves Paul. It's not a Jewish name. There are Jews in the United States who are so ignorant of Torah and so assimilated and so anxious to ingratiate themselves with their Gentile hosts that they take on the name Paul. So you might think that that's a Jewish name, but it's not. What Paul actually is a name that comes from the Hebrew word, the Hebrew root, Pa'al, Pei, Ayin, Lamed. Pa'al means to be active, something that has to do with activation, activity, to act on. And that root exists in many, many, many different grammatical forms. All of the grammatical forms in Hebrew, the verb forms, are forms of this kind of what we call pa'al. There's pa'al, which is a verb kind of set of conjugations. Pi'el, hif'il, huf'al, hitpa'el, nitpalel, yesh kama v'kama. About all of them are forms of pa'al, acting on. The verb form pa'ul, which is the assumed name of this Shaul who began to call himself Pa'ul, is not normally used. But if it were to be used, it would mean activated. It would mean that he was made an agent. It was this Jew, Shaul, who took on the job of being a Paul, of being an agent for the Jews, sent out to the Gentiles. And why? The rabbis knew that the Jews were in danger of forgetting Torah, that they weren't going to be speaking Hebrew on a regular basis. So they had to devise some way of getting you Gentiles in your languages to keep telling us things that would activate our desire to go back to the Hebrew language, to be able to return to Torah. The sages knew the Gentile psychology in and out. That's what I mean. That's what it means when it says they had to learn all the methods of sorcery. Sorcery in those days was the way through which they learned about your psychology, about the way your mind worked. And they knew all your languages. They knew exactly how to tell you a story, how it was going to impact on your consciousness, and how you were going to tell it back to us. The best way that they found to ensure that the Jews were not going to forget Torah was to having the Gentiles constantly reminding us of Torah. Because we had already been trained, and it was generation after generation, it was in our bodies already. Not just to look at the story, but to get a hearing of something that was deeper. They knew that as soon as you said certain key words, it was going to click in the depths of our soul and arouse within us a returning back to Hebrew. So they told you a number of stories which were very, very, very carefully crafted to give us the messages that we needed to hear, but that you would not understand. And you didn't need to understand them. We needed to understand them. But you had to be convinced that what you were saying was the absolute truth. You had to say it with the kind of conviction that was going to get you to say the same things generation after generation after generation, so that you were going to be constant psychic drivers for us to be able to hear the truth. The rabbis knew what they were doing. They were also very careful to see to it that there were hints written into what you call the New Testament that a Jew would know immediately that what you were saying wasn't the truth. For instance, there's a story about they go and they talk to the Gentiles and they eat with they eat with the Gentiles, and then there's a discussion between them whether or not it's okay to eat with the Gentiles because they're not circumcised. And as I've said in other videos, whether or not someone is circumcised or not has nothing to do whatsoever with whether or not you can eat with them. Not only was that Pharisaic law, I'll read a translation of something from the Dead Sea Scrolls. By the way, I'm reading from Reclaiming the Dead Sea Scrolls by Lawrence Schiffman, which is an excellent book. I just took out my page holder. What they're talking about in the Dead Sea Scrolls is the punishment that someone gets for a number of different infractions in the Dead Sea sect. And one of the punishments they got was that they could no longer eat pure food. In fact, people who came to the community as newcomers were not allowed to eat the pure food or drink the pure liquids either. They were Jews, they were circumcised, so there were no Jews who said that whether or not you can eat with someone had anything to do with them being circumcised. So that was one of the ways in which the sages let us know that the stories that you're telling us are not the truth, even while it was activating something inside of us. I cannot tell you the secrets that you were told to tell us, because that's not your business. You wouldn't understand them even if I did tell you. But I'll give you some of the key words, and you'll be able to understand some of it. Okay? The word the father in Hebrew would be ha'av. Ha'av, the same letters is ahav, which means to love. So you were constantly telling us that what's most important is to love. But more importantly, what you put emphasis on was haben. Ben, the son. The word ben in Hebrew in the gematria are two very, very important gematriot. One is barech, which means to bless, and the other one is Shabbat, the Sabbath. So while you were telling us ben, 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 the son, the son, the son, the Jewish soul is hearing Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbat. You were psychically driving us not to be able to forget our Shabbat. And I thank you for it. Ruach HaKodesh, this one's beautiful. The word Ruach in Hebrew also has two very, very, very important gematriot, alternative readings. One is Yarad, which means to come down. Another one is Dikduk, which means grammar. Holy Spirit is translated as Ruach HaKodesh. So while you're talking about the Holy Spirit, what the Jewish soul was hearing was Ruach HaKodesh, Ruach HaKodesh, Ruach HaKodesh. You were returning us to the holy grammar of Hebrew. And what is Hebrew? Ivrit. It's made up of two basic concepts. The ayin, the letter ayin, can be read as sod, which means the secret, and brit, which means the covenant, the secret of the covenant. So while you were talking about the Holy Spirit, the Jewish soul kept hearing Ruach HaKodesh, Dikduk, Dikduk HaKodesh, Dikduk HaKodesh. Go back, hear the holy grammar. The name Yeshua, the Jewish soul for thousands of years knows that the letter Pei, one of the easiest ways of changing that around, is into a Yud and an Ayin. So as soon as we see the Yud at the beginning and the Ayin at the end of Yeshua, or Yeshua, that has the Hey in it, we automatically see it as Safa, which is the word language. Again, you're returning us back to our language. You were talking your stories, which were implanted in your consciousness. You were believing the stories, but we were hearing what our rabbis wanted us to remember. The crown of thorns, I told you that the word goyim is also hatagim, which means the crowns. Those are the crowns on the Hebrew letters. Another word that the rabbis used for tagim was kotzim. Kotzim is thorns. They were also called kotzim because they have a pointy kind of a shape. So when you were talking about the crown of thorns, what we kept hearing was the kotzim, hatagim, haketer. Again, you were returning us back to our Hebrew language. You were talking yours, but we were hearing ours.
If you want to know the identity of the men who rule the world from the shadows, all you have to do is unscramble the puzzle pieces of the 2012 Olympic Games logo. Yes, many have commented that it looks like a distorted swastika. But if you unscramble the 5 puzzle pieces, you will probably make the intended mistake of thinking the logo is the numbers 2012, which is what you're supposed to think. But look again. The unscrambled logo spells the word Zion, and to make no mistake about it, the Zionist designer dotted the I.
And then remember, 1776, 2012, the New World Order is the kingdom of God. And that God has a name, Leo Lion Zagami, the Lion of Zion, the loyal mage of Zion. Amen, why? Because when you watch the sun, is Hamun Ra, my father. Amen then to you from the Grand Master of the Illuminati.
Why was the word Zion chosen for the 2012 Olympic logo? Because the shadow government of Zionists will be coming out of the closet in 2012 to celebrate the fulfillment of the protocols of their learned elders. What are the protocols? The protocols are a revolutionary step formula to enslave the world in debt, subjugate the ignorant masses, and concentrate all of the world's power and wealth.
Virgin, the gematria of the word virgin, is equal to metig, which is one of the cantillations in Hebrew. It's also equal to gedulat, which means the greatness of. It's also equal to gil haneshama, which means the joy of the soul. It's also equal to hashofet gadol, the judge is great. So while you're thinking virgin, 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 we look at it and we also know that the lamed can be changed into a yud and a kaf, and we see the bet and the tav in it, and we can see that we can see the root katav, we can see the root to be written within it. That's salav. That's beautiful. Salav is the cross. Salav is sayin lamed bet. So you have tzadi and lev. Lev is heart. That's where your word love comes from, and the letter tzadi. So one of the ways that we understood when you were talking cross, we were hearing lev yodea, the heart knows, the knowing of the heart. Crucifixion, this is the one that's really going to bug you, especially you anti-Semites. The word crucifixion is sliva. If I add the tzadi and the yud in sliva, I get the word Kabbalah. So all the time while you were talking about the crucifixion, you were actually returning us to the Kabbalah, which you think is so terrible. What I've told you now is the absolute truth about Christianity. The holiness that you saw in Christianity did not reside in the stories per se. Unlike Torah, in which holiness resides in the stories, and the stories themselves have various levels which take you to various levels deeper and deeper, your stories do not do that. But there were keywords in them, there were what they call phenords in them, there were mental stimulators in them, which when you talked about your stories and your languages, the Jewish soul, which even if you don't speak Hebrew, was always connected to Hebrew, would be activated. We heard something. We knew what you were saying was wrong 100%. But at the same time, something about it kept saying, there's something there, there's something there. And as we began to look at it, God drew us back to Torah. So, on the one hand, you have the merit of generation after generation returning the Jews to Torah. On the other hand, you have the demerit of having tried to drag us down into paganism, of torturing us in various ways, of denigrating our tradition, of calling the holy the profane, misrepresenting our sages, and you did all that in the name of Christianity. And although your merits will stand for you when we all come before the supernal court, and I promise we will. That's a promise. You're also going to have to explain your demerits. The rabbis took a terrible, terrible risk when they entrusted you with this mission. They knew that you were going to carry it out, but they also knew that there was going to be a lot of pain involved in it. And that's between you and God to straighten out. I can't do that work for you. Thank you for listening.
In Zionist hands under one world empire. Zionist extremists want you to believe that the protocols of the learned elders of Zion is a fraud and that it is anti-Semitic. Don't believe anyone or any website that tells you it's authentic or that it's a fraud. The truth can be found in actions, not words.
And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. I was introduced to the late Dr. Werner von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him during that first 3.5 hours, He said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over. And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. And they're all lies.
To clean up the oil, and at that point he was immediately shut down in the interview.
He didn't get help from Craig Venter or any of these guys, right? Who are also genetically modifying microbes and talking about these bacteria that's going to be able to eat carbon dioxide and all this stuff. Do you know anything about that?
He may well have done. I mean, absolutely. I mean, basically, there's no question that those microbiologists that remain alive.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's been a pretty high-risk occupation, isn't it, over the last decade or so?
Yeah.
But there is no question here that they have effectively turned the whole area into a laboratory. I mean, it is an unprecedented experiment. We really have no idea where this is going. And of course, the fact that nothing is getting reported, even in the USA. And I mean, I'm speaking to the Gulf Coast activists who live in the area on a regular basis, and they are literally, exasperated. I mean, exhausted and exasperated in their efforts to try and sort of raise awareness of what's actually occurring. And like I said, because it's not getting reported, people think it's all done, it's all finished,
right?
And they just don't want to know.
So, CDC is warning about zombie apocalypse coming to the United States. Are these hints about in what aspects do you think that this might be developing into some kind of we're changing the human being? How is it possible to do that?
Well, I mean, we've got the other ingredient now of radiation, and I think that it's pretty well accepted within the United States that the information being given out by the federal government regarding radiation levels is not even worth the internet ink that it's written with. And once again, I don't think we're going to know or perhaps appreciate the full implications of this for a long time to come. But I mean, imagine the worst case scenario where what we've got is genetically modified microbiology, which is having an accelerated development because of the radiation that is in the atmosphere and falling into the water. Then we've got this microbiology that is literally crossing species through the horizontal gene transfer. Coupled with everything else that's attacking humanity right now. And I mean, where do we start? I mean, GM food, vaccines, bisphenol A.
That's all, folks.